it's time for our speaker, and he is one of our regulars and part of our community, and we always treasure what he has to share with us. So let's spend a Sunday with Timber. Timber Hawkeye. Go ahead, Timber.
Thank you. I don't know if you're going to enjoy what I have to share with you today. We will find out. I am working on a podcast episode that focuses on something I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is normal. What is normal? And how has that played a role in my life? And I also started thinking about something I've never talked to you guys about, which is, what does unity mean to me? And it all comes together, interestingly enough, with the songs today and the reading. And I'm going to try to make it all make sense, but work with me if it doesn't, or jump in and tell me to circle back. I was very surprised when I looked up the actual definition of the word normal. The dictionary says it means conforming to something that is typical, usual, or expected. It doesn't tell you what normal is. Normal is conforming to. So nothing and nobody is inherently normal. Some people just choose to conform to what is typical or expected of them. And immediately I felt both relieved that there is no set definition of normal, perhaps even a little angry at myself for not looking up the definition earlier in life. And then I thought, conforming to, meaning how many times in my life have I conformed to what was expected of me in order to be normal or to appear normal, to fit in. And we talk a lot about peer pressure with children and adolescents and college, things that you do because of peer pressure, but we don't regularly normally talk about peer pressure as adults. And the reason I said I'm not sure you're going to like what I have to share with you today is because once I started thinking about this, so how often we normalize something, it only made me realize how resistant in so many ways I've become to being okay with it, if that makes sense. And I think over the last couple of years, especially, it's been going on for a long time, but over the last couple of years with the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement, we have highlighted part of the social problem has been that we've normalized up until recently racist jokes, for example, or demoralizing women, or all of these things that are not okay, but we've normalized them because it was accepted to tap your flight attendant on the behind when she walks by, and it was a joke. It was lighthearted. It wasn't. And when we normalize these things, we essentially group ourselves with those who believe that it's okay to do that. And we may not believe it's okay to do that, but we don't want to stick out. We don't want to seem as abnormal, as different. So when someone makes a joke at the beginning of our event today about let's all serve alcohol with our sessions, by normalizing the consumption of alcohol, of toxins, of killing and eating pigs, when we normalize these things, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone saying anything is wrong or right or good or bad, I'm saying that as soon as I became aware of how many times in my life I have laughed at a joke, perhaps because I didn't want to feel left out, because I wanted to feel welcomed and accepted and one with everyone, and how many times in my life I've done things that were far beyond my comfort zone in order to fit in. And then there's the moment of thinking, okay, where does unity fit in? what I would like to think is, or at least for me, what unity means to me is that we leave behind the things that separate us, and we focus on what unites us despite those differences, if that makes sense. And it doesn't separate us from people who are not part of unity. I think that is really important for me to keep reminding myself, that all these Sunday services all over the world, under any roof with any religion, they're coming together with like-minded people. And for me, unity is this great place where we come together with unlike-minded people, if that makes sense, where it's perfectly okay to not be normal, to not conform to the normal. In fact, perhaps we've come together because there was no place for us to fit in, or in order to fit in, we had to conform, we had to change who we were, laugh at jokes, or nod our heads, or say amen to things that were perhaps not aligned with who we are. And so perhaps what unites us is everything that again, I don't know if I have the right words to it, but I don't know if throughout life we actually try to find ourselves, or if we really already know who we are, but we are constantly trying to fit in with those around us. And it starts with school and doing, whatever is cool to fit in, and through life, through what is the definition of success? What is the definition of religious? It's like we audition for different roles, and whichever role we play that gets us the best response, that gets us a standing ovation, that's the role we say, oh, we did well there. Okay, that's my crowd. That's the role I'm going to play. Not because it's who I am, but because it's who the world is most comfortable accepting. I fit into that. I look the part. I play it well. I'm going to do that. And at some point, even though that may seem easy, I don't think it is. I don't think it's easy to spend an entire lifetime being inauthentic of who we are, of pretending to be something or someone else, or believing something else, or agreeing with someone, or disagreeing. Whatever it is, whenever we are inauthentic, we create the very internal conflict that I think the Buddha was talking about, saying that is the cause of suffering. It's not the conflict outside of us. It's when we are internally conflicted. And that creates pain. It hurts to live with that every day. And perhaps when we have so much pain, when we have so much suffering, when we're so internally conflicted between who we authentically are and who we're pretending to be, then we resort to things like alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever your drug of choice is, in order to fit in. It's okay. Here you can do that. And I don't mean to, again, even separate myself out or call anyone out on anything specific. In fact, I want to go beyond that, of what I love about unity is that I can come into this group and even voice out loud saying, I don't think it's okay to normalize in a group where we don't know that maybe someone is struggling with addiction or in recovery, to suggest that alcohol is normal and perfectly okay and we should all partake in it. I can voice that, but not say, I don't want to be a part of this community because you don't all agree with me. I can say we all come together because we have very different views on almost everything, except the fact that we think it's okay for all of us to believe in perhaps a different God or no God at all, and still come together to strengthen our resolve to live authentically. And for me, what that means is if it's authentic for you to drink, to hunt, to eat, whatever, do that. My question is, at what point are we attempting to normalize something? And I'm going to take something less controversial, perhaps. We normalize 80-hour work weeks like it's perfectly okay and natural. We even brag about it, about how, oh, I worked so hard this week and I had all these calls and I was up late and I was finishing this. Again, normalize means conforming to what is typical and expected. And when we normalize something in a very roundabout way, or maybe even a very indirect way, I'd love for it to be a discussion. Are we essentially saying it's okay? You can continue doing that when we normalize racism, when we normalize hatred, because we can very well normalize kindness. We can very well normalize acceptance and love. And that's why we come together, is to tap into those parts of us, at least for me, that are perhaps muted all week long because we're not in the company of other people who see the world the way we do. And then we come together and we allow that voice to come through and look within and go, okay, then why am I in conflict the other 6 days of the week? It's not up to anyone else, I don't think, to resolve that conflict. It's up to us. I think that was the Buddha's invitation to say, look, suffering is real, but we create it ourselves. It's easy to point the finger at someone else and say, you're the problem. And I think at the root of much of that is something very few of us are willing to admit, which is having a superiority complex. When we had a discussion about unsolicited advice and when it's okay to offer it. And I'm from the school of it's never okay to offer it unless you're asked. And the reason for that is you can't tell someone what you think they should do without it being preached from a point of hierarchy of I'm superior to you. You clearly don't know what you should do. I need to help you. I'm better. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but there's a superiority complex. It's what I'll be really honest. It's what sent me running from Judaism in the first place. I was born and raised in Israel, and going to the synagogue, and one of the chants and prayers that we say regularly is Adonai hu Elohim. My God is the God. And it didn't mean much to me. It didn't really register much when I was living in Israel. But when I was going to synagogue in the States, then it became very clear. We are reaffirming, the Jewish people, the fact that you know what I mean. We are reaffirming that our God is the God, implying all the other gods people are talking about are false gods. Only our God is the God. And immediately it created this superiority, like we know the truth, all these other people, we need to help them. And when you think about organized religion, many of them do send people door to door to try and convert them, to try and rescue them, to try and help them. But are we helping when we come at people from a place of, I'm better than you, you need me, let me help you? Is that, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever been susceptible to conversion, if that makes sense. I have a resistance to conformity in general. So if normal means conforming to what is typical, can we normalize non-conformity? Can we make the flag, the symbol that's around Brian, of all the faiths and the religions and the beliefs, can that just be the stained glass at all places of worship where we normalize acceptance and without demonizing anyone who believes anything else. I don't know if that's possible. Again, I would love to open this up for discussion because I don't have my mind wrapped around this, but I wanted to talk about, for the first time, unity means to me us coming together with unlike-minded people. Does that make sense? Anyone? Brian, jump in. Anyone? Does that make sense that we are not like-minded and that perhaps is what brings us together? Does that resonate?
The short answer is yes. I'll have more to say in a few minutes when you're done.
It's not about being done or not done. Like, and I've heard last time even that when we went into it and we started having a discussion about it, that really resonated with some people. So I'd love to.
All right. So my immediate response is, as the pastor, I love it knowing you, Timber, when you get on and say, I don't think you're going to like this. Because that tells me that you might be kind of jabbing us a little bit and reminding us of what we really do believe or to question. You know, one of the things that I like to say about unity is unity is a great place to get your answers questioned.
And, well, yes. And if you don't mind if I jump in, I love that when I was seeing teenagers at Unity, that what we taught them was to trust themselves, that we didn't, that's what we normalized, is that the voice that's inside of you that's telling you who you are, if it's saying negative things, then you need to focus elsewhere. But once you get to that calm, peaceful place, trust it. And that's what we kept telling them was trust yourself, trust yourself, trust yourself, even if that made them a Bible thumping, you know, over here, or if it made them an atheist over here. And in this community, when I was first brand new as a prayer chaplain, my daughter was about 14, she's 20 now. And Rebecca stood up in front of the congregation and said, oh, Camille's an atheist. And as a prayer chaplain, I was horrified. I was like, oh my God, what are you doing? And this community, these people here, just like, it didn't faze anybody. They're like, yeah, she's 14. That's what 14-year-olds do. And since then, she has matured into a different definition of what God is and what that means in her life. And so she no longer identifies that way. And at the same time, myself, I'm like, you know, there's parts of atheism that resonate with me. Like, I don't believe in a man in the sky, you know? And so, like, it broadened my mind and it broadened hers. And it was a very healing. And my poor little Mormon heart was like, you don't say things like that at church. But yeah, it was very powerful for all of us. So,
I think hearing you say that, unity to me is like Berkeley, California. You know, you can come in as you are, blue spiky hair, and no one's going to judge you. It's like, oh yeah, there's another human, you know, and to leave it at that is such a beautiful invitation. And yeah, I said I'm going to say some, you know, I'm worried about what I'm going to say if it's not going to resonate, because I do believe what the Buddha did, what our job is to look in the mirror and look, okay, am I living a congruent life? Am I living an authentic life? Am I just saying that I believe in God, or do my actions convey that? Because if I was to meet someone and not tell them what I believe, and they just watched my behavior over a week, will they have a clear idea of what my priorities are, what my values are? You know, and because our actions speak not just louder than our words, but more honestly, you know, and so I don't care what people say they think or believe or whatnot, but like our actions. And that to me, you know, having recently watched the interview of Elliot Page with Oprah and listening, and if some of you don't know, Elliot Page was biologically born and raised as female, but even as a little kid, asked his mom, said, hi mom, like when I grow up, I want to be a boy. Not even knowing what that means, just knowing I don't feel comfortable in my skin. This is not who I want to be when I grow up. And throughout the entire life, just pressured to be who he thought he should be, until a meltdown at, you know, Elliot Page, very, very famous in Hollywood, won an Oscar, and before going to the show, 3 different dresses were laid on the bed, saying, you know, have your pick of any designer dress you want for tonight, and had a complete meltdown saying, you're forcing me to conform, to fit into, to normal, you know, to be normal in what feels really unnatural for me. And that created a breakdown, which for many of us is the gateway to a breakthrough. And I just think it's beautiful when we realize, I guess, when we look in the mirror and go, where have I been inauthentic? Where have I changed, modified, altered who I truly am? A part of me who's no one else has ever seen, maybe even not even admitting it to myself. And maybe it's time for me to be really who I am. And if someone has a problem with it, it's their problem to fix, not mine. You know, and that's where I feel perfectly comfortable being invited to hold up a mirror and go, look what you're doing. Because if something someone says doesn't resonate with us, we need to look within us and go, why does that bother me? And what can I change within me? Not how can I stop them? Does that make sense, Brian? The role that you have, where people look to you essentially for answers, but you, like you said, you just offer more questions. So when I published the book Buddhist Bootcamp, it was very interesting that the majority of the very negative feedback to the book came from diehard Buddhists who have spent, 30, 40 years of their lives with one path to Buddhism. And here come me and say, hey, there are many paths up the mountain. And when you tell that to someone who has spent 40 years on one path, that will ruffle their feathers. Now, am I the bad guy for ruffling their feathers? Or are we to get to a place where our feathers cannot be ruffled? I don't know. I don't know how. And it's not about cancer culture, and it's not about being oversensitive, but just being conscious and aware. I want to bring this back to the topic of what am I normalizing and why am I doing it? Because so many times we try to normalize something to make us feel better about ourselves, because the alternative is admitting that we have a problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Timber, can I just make a distinction?
Anyone?
I hear what you're saying about normalization of things that shouldn't be normalized, so to speak. But in my head, I hear a distinction between a behavior versus a spiritual principle. So you are elevating the conversation towards something that I think is a spiritual principle that anyone can subscribe to, like love and compassion and forgiveness and kindness. And you can still do that being a beer drinking, beef eating,
for sure.
You know what I mean? So a workaholic. If you know what I mean? You can't be loving and kind and compassionate and forgiving and be a racist or, a sexist, I don't think. But if you choose a behavior such as I want to work 80 hours a week, that's a slightly different kind of thing than an attitude. Maybe that's. And
so I love that distinction. And I just want to make it very clear that that distinction is to be made individually for every person. I can't sit here and say, well, you can't be loving and compassionate and then, eat meat. Like, it's not for me to decide. Like, for each of us to go and look at ourselves going, can I consider myself compassionate and kind and loving and eat this steak? And if the answer is yes, then you're being authentic, you're being true, you're completely, because to me, Buddhism is about behavior modification. It's about making sure, like Gandhi said, that happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are all in alignment. I think that's the spiritual aspect you were talking about. And that's why I love that it's not anyone else's job to look at your behavior and say, well, you're being hypocritical. My invitation is for each of us to look at ourselves and say, am I being hypocritical in any way? Does that make sense? Because I didn't mean to imply that I'm the one making that judgment call.
No. I didn't take it that way.
Okay, great.
I think what you're talking about, normalization of things, and I'm thinking that the normalization that we do might be of attitudes rather than behaviors, and once you adopt a certain type of attitude, it changes your behavior. But yes, it makes perfect sense what you said, and that's what unity and other spiritual practices are about. It's about finding the power within the individual and allowing that person to make that distinction in accordance with what is in alignment with their spiritual truth. Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's what I love about unity, is the truth with a small t as opposed to a capital T. When you mentioned earlier that what unites us is love and whatnot, I'm thinking about a podcast episode that I did, again, controversial, surprise, surprise, understanding hatred. And it happened when I had just visited my sister, who is 3 years older than I, married with 3 kids, and perhaps quite openly very racist. And racist in a way where she will not allow her daughter to date anyone who isn't Jewish. And she feels it's perfectly okay because she loves the Jewish faith and religion and race and culture so much. In her words, which make me cringe, she doesn't want to dilute it by introducing another culture. However, that passion is driven by how much she loves her culture, and she doesn't want to lose it. She doesn't want to lose the language. She doesn't want to lose the culture, the celebration, the holidays, the traditions. She loves them so much. So it's from the outsider's perspective, it's like, oh my God, she's so hateful and racist and anti this, and you're not allowed to date Blacks and Puerto Ricans and all this stuff. And I'm like, you live in Florida, you do realize that, right? And at the same time, it could be seen from her perspective of, no, I just love our tradition so much. I want it to continue, and I've invested, as she says it, in my daughter, and I want her to continue our traditions. Yeah, Marcia.
Say something.
Hi.
I have my hand up.
Oh, we'll go.
Also
Sorry.
Saying
It's okay.
so resonates with me. You're able to hear me, right? Yeah.
Yes. Who was it else who said that they wanted to say
I
something?
said I did.
Okay. All right. We'll go to you next. I promise.
I've been waving my hand. Here.
I think that what I'm hearing you say, I have some thoughts about the whole Judaism thing, but what I'd like to jump back to is what I'm hearing you say is that it's important for us to be conscious and aware and notice ourselves and how much we're buying into being normal. And if that normal is serving us in a positive way and is serving the greater community in a positive way. If my normal is to be unkind to somebody because they are different than I am, or I conceive of them as less than or danger or whatever, then it's important for me to look at that and make a note and decide if I'm willing and want to make a change.
And if that's learned behavior, like you're just doing that because that's all you've known, because that's how your parents are and that's how everyone around you is, even though inside you're like, I don't feel comfortable doing this, but everyone else, that's what I meant about peer pressure, the adult peer pressure, as opposed to I don't want to be the odd one out. And it's like, be the odd one out, like never trade in your authenticity for approval. Be you, and the rest of the world will adjust.
Being able to notice that and discriminate.
That's all. Yes.
Is the challenge.
Yeah, that's the challenge. Absolutely.
Faced with it constantly. Okay. Thank you.
Peggy, go ahead. Of course. Thank you.
Well, what popped in my mind when you were talking about your sister is that I'm sure you agree that she's coming from a fear-based reality in her mind, in her heart. it's fear that
Mhm.
it will, if she allows her daughter to,
That she would
connect
lose her
with somebody.
tradition and her,
Yeah, and it
of
would
course.
change for the family. The world will change because I'm not making the change there. And I was going to say, in my own life, even though my dad was a career man in the Air Force for 20 years, he was not the traditional conservative Republican that I've observed of other military people. And he told me at an early age to not follow the path of everyone else, not be the same, be different, be an individual, be myself. Well, that was a little hard to try to understand and incorporate into my life, not knowing how is it being different, and then also going out on a limb in different times, being different, and that's not really okay, is the feedback I got from so
It's very
many different-
confusing
very
growing up
different-
when our teachers tell us, reach for the stars, you can be whatever you want, and just be true to you, but go to college, get married, have kids. It's like, wait a minute, but am I supposed to do what you expect me, or am I supposed to be me? Like, at what point do we do a timeout and check?
Well,
and I'm hoping today is
many times when I spoke up and spoke my truth, my thinking, that was not okay.
For someone else.
It wasn't the same as everyone else's thought patterns. And I thought, wow, I still deal with that quite a bit, because I live in a very conservative area and I'm not.
And that's just it. If someone has a problem with it, as I said earlier, it's their problem to solve, not yours. Be authentic to you, as opposed to changing who you are to fit in. And it's not, I'm not saying it's easy. That's the whole point of this conversation. But it's easier than spending an entire life being inauthentic and creating conflict within you. It's like when the Dalai Lama was asked why he doesn't fight back against the Chinese, and he said, because for him, fighting and violence and all that is not okay. So even though he's being fought with, and there's war outside of him between China and Tibet, he goes, the minute I fight back, the war is not outside of me anymore. Now the war is inside of me. And so that's the idea, is where is there internal conflict? It's up to us to resolve. That's the invitation. That's why I said this may not be a popular topic, because I'm inviting us to do some work, to look within and go, where am I being a hypocrite? And people don't like that. They just want to have their beliefs and their opinions and their views affirmed and said, hallelujah, and I agree with you, and go home and feel good about themselves, not go home and go, shoot, I have some work to do. So that's where I felt like this may not be a popular choice, but who knows? I don't know. We'll see if I'm invited to come back.
I feel it is important to speak up if we feel strongly about something, such as yesterday. I was in a store. I noticed the man that was helping me with the project had signs of a local infection on his arm. He had a Band-Aid over a cut. And I gave attention to that to him because I'm a nurse. And I just feel like that's part of who I am. And that I need to put that out of showing human to human concern. Not that I know better than you do, but I notice you have redness around, are you taking care of that? So anyway, that's what I do.
Okay. Vicki, did you have something?
Yeah, I have been looking a lot at fitting in versus connection. If you're not authentic, you cannot connect with other people. And to me, unity is a lot about connecting with other people.
Yeah. And I think that's what invites me to be part of it, is we connect, even though I'm not gonna show up at social hour and I'm not gonna sing along and I don't like hugs, but that's okay. And I loved the very first time I showed up at Unity when Brian said in the initial meet and greet, to hug your neighbor if they're okay with it, or just bow to them if they're not. And I'm like, Brian, I love you. Because so few places give those of us who are not comfortable with that the space, the permission, the allowance, the awareness to other people that, hey, someone may not want to be hugged, and so like that to me just opens it up for everybody, if that makes sense. So I guess to wrap up, because I know I've gone over time, I just wanted to thank you, Brian, for being the liquid glue that holds us together. It's not firm, it's not rigid, it's not going to break. It's only going to keep allowing more to come in and become a more beautiful mosaic, not a firm, this is what we are and nothing else, if that makes sense. So I guess this is just my shout out to you for doing such an incredible job, making someone who isn't normal in any way whatsoever, because that's what this is all about, is me saying, hey, I'm not normal, feeling welcomed despite my very differing worldview. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Timber. I really appreciate you and love that you're part of our community.